Welcome to another edition of the Shadowcast. And today we have the folklore of the East Midlands, part 2. As ever, I'm joined by Chris Ball.
Hi.
And Dave Bray.
Hi.
And for this second part, we are rejoined by Dylan Knight of Tales from the Other Wood.
Hi.
Nice to see you again, Dylan.
And you. In fact, it's good to see all three of you. So it's made my day brighter.
Oh, that's good.
So obviously we had so much to talk about in the last edition. We thought it would be a good idea to go into a part 2. So I think just to start off, let's have a think about one of the niche areas of folklore. Could you tell us what are the important ingredients of folk horror?
Now then, this is where I feel a bit of a fraud because I don't really cover folk horror. But I've actually read some folk horror for my own podcast, written by a good friend of mine, Mel Basver. And I've also read some books on it as well. So folk horror, for those not in the know, is a fictionalized version based upon something that's to do with local folklore from some specific place. But they all seem to have very similar themes in terms of it's got to be set in a local area, first of all. It's got to be also drawn or based upon a local myth or legend or something of that particular area. And then what usually happens, they are usually modern day. So 21st century, sometimes even 20th and even 19th century. But they all tend to be set, wherever they're set, that's their present. And it's usually outsiders who have come in to a local area for a new location for their home or a vacation, a holiday, or insert reason why they've entered this particular space. And then they find that things are not as idyllic as they hoped, and that everything ties to a local ghost story or a local tradition or a local set of beliefs, or even a local cult. And then usually horror ensues, i.e. someone getting possessed and horrible things happening around them, and excuse me, or things are going a little bit awry and finding that the local villagers are preparing for some kind of festival that they are completely unaware of, or they come to learn, oh, there's a local harvest festival going on, unaware that they will be part of that harvest festival, whether they like it or not. And then usually it ends in some grisly kind of way. So, as I kept saying in the last episode, when I rewatched it, for example, there is a series of books based upon local folklore for Cumbria. So Cumbria Folk Tales has its own folk horror set as well, and one of them drew upon the ghost of this particular pub. And how that happened was that this family came to this pub and they were going to stay in the Lake District. It's going to be all very nice and very, very relaxing. And as the week went on, there was a sinister feeling that the young daughters had felt it was in their room. The dad poo-pooed it, but then the oldest daughter starts behaving very, very strangely, and she's carving things into the wood in the pub. She's carving messages. She's also leaving bits and pieces here and there and being very, very out of character. And then it gets to the point where the dad has had enough of this behavior and thinks, is my daughter just basically going off the rails because someone's breaking into her room and scaring her, or worse? So being the dutiful father, he decides to stay up all night and then finds that actually there is the ghost of this highwayman who is possessing his daughter. And at the end of that particular story, she goes missing while still being possessed and no one can find her. And so the horror there is that not only do you see your own child turn against you, but you're also seeing your own child turn against you because she has literally become somebody else. and now you have no idea what's happened to her because she's taken off.
Well, that's certainly a terrifying prospect, and one that would still resonate in the 21st century.
Absolutely. So so the best way, I suppose, really is that for folk horror, it's got to draw upon something historic in the local area, something that's relatable, so people can actually tune into the stories, whether it affects family or whether it affects someone doing their job and finding that they are in a world which is completely against the norm and doesn't follow the usual rules, and results in either their transformation into something else or even their own death, or in some cases they become the ghost.
Fantastic stuff. At this point, I'd just like to bring Dave in, because I know he was interested in asking a question about the role of religion in folklore. Dave, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I suppose the ones down, I think I would like much at the Dark Ages, because you've got obviously St. George and the Dragon. You've got obviously St. Patrick, who's supposed to got rid of all the snakes in Ireland. And then local ones, you've got St. Perrin, who's kicked out of Ireland. They put like a millstone on him to try and drown him, but he managed and landed in Cornwall. So I don't know if there's any sort of in the East Midlands area, is there any sort of like saints or characters that are mixed in like in the Dark Ages? I mean, I know you mentioned the last one, the earliest stories of folklore were maybe 900 AD or something like that, the first ones.
That's right, which was a Saxon princess who was who led the battle of Leicester against the Viking hordes. In terms of saints in the East Midlands, we're sadly lacking in that department, I'm afraid. There is the usual stories where you've got a church and there's a stone, a mysterious stone left over from a stone circle. Lenton Priory. Supposedly, the legend is that the devil was seeing the assembled Lenton Priory being built in Nottinghamshire, and he absolutely hated the idea, so he thought he'd destroy it by launching a rock from Castleton in Derbyshire. He takes this massive rock, he throws it, and as usual in the legends, he misses. And that rock ended up landing near Lenton Priory, but not so near it didn't destroy it. And this is this massive, huge rock in Nottingham, which is all by itself. The Hemlock Stone, it's called. And it's just literally this huge, huge rock with a kind of bulbous head. And that's kind of sparked off a folklore all of its own, because the legend locally has it that this was used by druids back in ye old pagan times, where they would climb upon the rock at the summer festival, Bealtaine, and then they would set the fires on top of the rock. And apparently that was actually done during the 1500s when they had ladders and everything else like that. But having visited it myself, it's like, well, I can see it being done. It's a hell of a hard work for the individual to climb upon there and make a bonfire. It's not exactly an easy thing, but there is a story from Lincolnshire where there is similar to the Lenton Priory one, where you have the building of Lincolnshire Cathedral, and it was all organised by a man who was basically the bishop. He was the Archbishop, in fact, of Lincoln, Remigius Lefebvre, and he was just overseeing the final preparations for the cathedral for its completion, and he became very aware that there was a very big dark cloud heading towards Lincoln, and there was this all-powerful sense of evil coming from that particular cloud. So he tells all the masons to get down from the scaffolding, because this is going to hit Lincoln in minutes. Get down from the scaffolding, get yourselves inside, people, get everybody safe, get everybody locked away. And he basically waited until this storm arrived, and he could sense the devil was riding in that storm. And indeed, what was happening was that the devil noticed this cathedral was being built. He didn't want it built. He didn't want it finished. So he wanted to create a storm that was big enough to destroy that particular new cathedral being built. So Remigius Le Fay Camp, he's there. He's standing in front of the cathedral. He's praying, and actually through his prayer diverts the storm. So it goes over Lincoln, but the effects of the storm don't hit the cathedral. And the storm passes. Over the next few days, things aren't going so well, because all the masons are noticing that their tools are disappearing, or some work that they've literally just completed has now become undone. And they can hear this weird sort of chattering and laughing along. And Remigius Le Fay Camp, while walking around the grounds of the cathedral, he spies this little small imp, this little small devil character, and he curses him into stone, where you can see today, if you go into Lincoln Cathedral, there's an archway towards the north, I think it is, and in that archway, that's called a sort of that shape, sat inside is this little horned figure who's got his leg, you can't see me on the camera, he's got his leg crossed above his knee, and he's got his massive grin upon his face and looks very, very mischievous, and he's kind of got his little goat legs thing going on, and he's got these big tabby ears and everything. And there's actually a second one, because what happened in the story was that as Archbishop Remigius is praying to God, it forces the storm away through these strong winds. And what happened was these two imps got caught inside the cathedral. One of them got locked in, which is the one that gets turned to stone, and the other one fell upon a witch's back. And when she turned, she found that she had this weird little creature on her shoulder, and it's got a dog's head, it's got goat legs, I think, or is it a fish tail? Either way, it's like two animals put together. And the minute it touched her, it turned her into stone and turned the imp into stone as well, because that's the two imps of Lincoln. One inside, which is the famous one, and one on the outside, which is less famous. And that story's been going on supposedly from medieval times. So it has actually come through the construction of that cathedral. But when you actually look at the history of when the cathedral was being built and when Remigius Le Fay Camp died, literally just before it was complete and before it could be consecrated, his basically his second in command was trying to raise funds so they could actually make Remigius Le Fay Camp a saint. And this whole idea was basically a marketing scheme. It's like, right, we've got this cathedral, how about we make this story for the Archbishop, and if we make him a saint, that means people will make a pilgrimage here to our cathedral, and then we can raise the funds that way. And it was rejected, but the story continued. So in terms of religious figures in Nottinghamshire, in the East Midlands, as a whole, that's kind of the nearest we've got to a religious figure that's actually as near to a saint as we're going to get. We're not as famous as everybody else because we don't have a saint. So if you've got one in Cornwall, you're very lucky. I know Ireland is blessed with saints. It's got loads of them. Scotland as well, especially with like Saint Columba, is it? Who went to Iona up in the Hebrides. So unfortunately, we're lacking in that department. But that's about as close as we can get. And even then, he wasn't sanctified, unfortunately.
That might be too because of the Celtic areas and also the Anglo-Saxon areas. That might have to do with that, how things are done. And also, interesting what you said about Lincoln, because I believe that's the nickname of the football team, the Imps. It's on the emblem. So that's where that's come from.
That's right. That's exactly where it comes from. So they actually take good pride in their heritage of one of their most local famous symbols. So they're very happy with that. So yeah, named a football team after it.
Would you say that there is a presence of religion within many of the folk tales? For example, in the more cautionary tales, is there usually the concern that a religious order might be very upset with somebody's practices, and so there is a punishment for that, for example?
Not in that particular regard. I mean, you did have the witch trials going off in the East Midlands, especially towards Leicestershire. So there's always there's always kind of accounts of anybody performing witchcraft was against God and against Christianity as a whole. Just to go back to Lincolnshire for a second, there's actually a story called The Green Mist, which has this kind of prologue before the actual story begins, talking from the teller, speaking about how there is the religion of the church and there's actually the religion of the people. And the religion of the church and the people are kind of kept separate, but in time their practices became one and the same to the point where no one could tell the difference anymore. And that's because these people still call themselves Christians, regardless of what acts they did. And one of the things that they did was supposedly there was a big fear of these things called boggarts, which are otherworldly creatures, and they don't all look like the same thing. They all have their own individual look and style, and basically, if you imagine a boggart, you could literally imagine anything, and that's what a boggart would look like. So to keep these creatures away, because they could affect humans and mortals, supposedly the folk of Lincolnshire would actually paint blood around the doorways, around the windows, and leave offerings of salt on rocks outside their homes. Bizarrely enough, one of the practices they had was also to do this and go into a field and say prayers in the corner of this field while digging out furrows and planting seeds and everything. And actually in Anglo-Saxon rituals, and these are Christian rituals, by the way, then they're not recorded as being from the pagan folk. There was actually something called the Achabot, which was a practice that it was a way of healing a sick field. And the actual practice for that was for saying the Lord's Prayer first thing in the morning, digging some furrows, going to each of the corners of that particular field, again saying your Lord's Prayer in each corner, and then you would take some sanctified bread, break it up into the furrows, and with a mixture of honey, milk, all the plant seeds in that local area, and then you would just make this solution and you pour that into the furrows, and you would start the whole ritual at sunrise all the way through to sunset, digging over the furrows with this solution inside and saying all these prayers. But one of the main prayers that was using the word Urche. In fact, it begins Urche, 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 and basically is a poem to the Earth Mother. A prayer to the Earth Mother. And it's like, that's very, very odd that you would have this organized religion that's actually just kind of hedging its bets and using an earth goddess figure as their main focus for making sure that the fields rejuvenate themselves. And I found that, especially with the boggart deterrent, kind of similar. And it's like, that's very, very odd. But saying that, throughout the East Midlands, there are plenty of examples where, by invoking the name of God or Jesus Christ, that scares away the spirits, or that scares away the other. In Derbyshire, there's the tale of a vicar who is going to go from one village to the other, but this other village is quite a few miles away. So he's about to get on his horse, and then finds his horse can't walk. There's something wrong with one of its legs. It's gone lame. So he speaks to the farrier to look after his horse, and he'll just make his way to the other village. So he starts on his walk, and he's heading along, and as the time goes on, it gets darker and darker, and it gets colder and wetter, and the rain comes, and he's basically caught in this thunderstorm. It gets to the point where it's so dark he can't see a thing, and ends up taking refuge in this house. He knocks on the door. This old man and his daughter are looking out towards him, and looking a bit miffed that they're being disturbed from whatever they're doing. And he basically asks for shelter. They let him in, saying that, look, there's no food and there's no drink tonight, but you can warm yourself up by the fire. So the vicar does, and he ends up going up to the bedroom that he's escorted to, and the old man warns him that this place is haunted by spirits. The vicar doesn't really think much of it. He goes into this bedroom, he washes his hands, washes his face, and he's really, really hungry at this point. And he ends up just lying in bed. He's about to drift off to sleep, and then he hears what sounds like pots and pans, and he can smell this cooking of food coming through the door. So his stomach's churning, and then he thinks, okay, maybe that this old man and the daughter weren't actually that mean after all. Maybe they are preparing something. So he relaxes. He hears footsteps coming outside the door to his room, and he hears a voice say, "Armalay, come on, dinner's ready." And goes back downstairs again. And the vicar's a bit confused because his name isn't Armalay, but that's the name that this person was saying. So he gets dressed, he goes downstairs, and he finds not the Spartan kitchen that he was originally brought into with its hearth. He finds a whole dinner table with all these beautiful young people sat in their finery, with what looks like silver plates and bowls full of food, and all these wonderful, gorgeous smells that are making him really, really hungry. And it looks like they were waiting for him. So he comes to the table, he sits, everyone's looking expectantly. They pour him a glass of wine, they reveal this massive ham that's been boiled, and the vicar says, please let me say grace before meat. And he begins his prayer. And by the time he's finished his prayer and he opens his eyes, there's nothing. There's no food, there's no table, there's no glass of wine, there's no company, there's nothing. It's all gone. And there's quite a few examples where spirits' behavior is going on, and people either invoke the name of God or they say a prayer, and the other just stops.
That's fascinating stuff. Just before we take a question from Chris, I was wondering, have you noticed in folklore tales generally across the country if there are any stereotypes in the way that men and women are presented?
Yes. In men, because most of the stories are about men, unfortunately. Men are either presented as religious types, or they're presented as bull-headed figure types who think it's a load of nonsense, or they're young men who are going off to seek their fortune. So Jack and the Beanstalk, which is the all-time, all-famous British folk story, where young man goes out to seek his fortune. He goes to market, basically exchanges his valuable cow for a couple of beans, which his mum's not impressed with, and we all know the rest. But that particular theme is quite prevalent through quite a lot of folk stories throughout the country. Especially more towards, if we're talking Britain as a whole, especially more towards Scotland and Ireland, there is that particular element where you've got three brothers The young brother, who is actually very, very nice. The older brother is a bit of an arse. The second brother is still a bit of an arse. But that third young brother, he's actually quite decent. And something happens where the older brother goes out and he either disappears or he doesn't find his fortune and comes back. Second brother does the same thing. And then the third brother, he actually goes out and he encounters the same thing that the eldest brother encountered, which in Derbyshire, there's a story about a young man who does exactly just this. But all three brothers were visited by a little small red man, as in like he's very short, he's got red hair, red beard, red skin, red clothes, and he's basically begging for food. The oldest brother tells him to go away. The second brother throws an apple pip at him, and then the third brother actually gives him pretty much the half of his food. This little red man is very, very grateful and tells him to go down the mine, keep going, and he'll meet him at the bottom. Your little brother does, goes down the bottom, and he ends up in this other world, this place which underground it's still got sky, it's still got trees, it's still got rivers, and he ends up going on an adventure, finding his fortune, finding his future wife, comes back all nicely dressed and got fortune, goes and lives with his dad, sets his house up, and makes sure that his dad is looked after. The older brothers get a bit jealous of this. They go to the exact same mine, they go in, and they never come back out because of their selfishness. But that whole idea of the oldest brother, the middle brother, being pig-headed and being inconsiderate, but the youngest brother is actually quite a decent soul, is something that's prevalent through Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, and I believe in some Cornish stories as well. But I'm not 100% certain on that last one. Women are either presented as witches, so let your imagination go with that particular version. So it's either old hag witches or very saucy young witches. Again, go with your imagination. Or women are actually quite brave, which seems to be quite a very dominant thing. It's almost like they have to go and do something that no one else would dare to do. Or they have got no choice and they have to do this thing. And it actually works out for their benefit. Or they're quite religious and maternal. So whether it's nuns and abbesses or it's mothers having to save their child in that kind of way. Strangely enough, in Nottinghamshire, there is at least one tale where a little boy is saying that his mum's going to eat him up. And this little boy, it turns out he wasn't lying. She really was putting him into an oven. But there is another little story where this little girl is taken in by a witch, and the witch tells her that if you work for me and be my cleaner and keep my house, you can have a bed, you can have a house to stay in, but whatever you do, don't go up the chimney. So the little girl spends about a week cleaning the witch's house, and she can't help but look up that chimney. So she ends up looking up the chimney and finds there's a bag inside. She takes the bag, looks inside, and sees more money in her life than anybody has ever seen before. Certainly the young girl herself. She ends up running away with the money and telling all the trees in the witch's orchard to keep her hidden. So the witch comes home. She finds that her bag of money is no longer there, and she goes into the garden, goes into the orchard, asks the apple tree, "Have you seen the little girl with a white bag?" "No," says the apple tree, and repeats this to the other trees, and all of them say no, they've not seen the little girl with a white bag, and she goes away. As soon as it's nightfall and the witch goes to sleep, the little girl runs away. So it's a wonderful allegory of, if you don't want something stolen, don't tell people where it is. Don't tell people, don't look up that chimney. But at the same time, you've got this young girl who is doing what she can to make ends meet, gets taken in by a witch. We're only told that she's a witch, but she can talk to the trees. I suppose that's her magic thing. And then she takes the money and goes. So she's done that thing of not only household robbery, but she's also looked after herself. So she's made a decision to have something better, I suppose.
So there's definitely a moral to many of these tales, isn't there?
Definitely. I will say that with the stories of women, they do tend to be of moral decisions and moral behaviors. Usually tales of if don't tell people secrets that you don't want repeating, how to be a good wife, how to be a good mother. There's definitely those kind of stereotypes in there.
And do you suspect that these tales were created by men, or a combination?
More than likely, I'm afraid. I suppose the idea there was that to make sure that young people behaved accordingly and stuck to social mores, and then they would tell these tales of what was kind of expected of them, so men could go off and find their fortunes, but women had to be proper and do the right thing.
Let's take a question from Chris at this point.
Yes, Dylan, I spoke to a lad who's actually from Leicester.
Oh yeah.
And he says there's something about the boogeyman in Leicester. Is this true? He said
there's go on.
He said the boogeyman. They used to tell the kids, and the kids used to be scared about it. And I just want to know what your opinion on that is.
There are two bogeymen type things in Leicestershire. One of them is called the 9 o'clock horses, which actually comes from 19th century. So that one, supposedly, what happens here is that your kids aren't going to bed. So it's like, right, if you don't go to bed, if you stay up late, the 9 o'clock horses will get you and they'll take you away. And the actual story behind that, it comes from history. So they had what was called the night soilman, who would take care of all the excreta, all the household waste, because there was no sewage system at this point, at least not yet. And they would literally chuck it out the window into the courtyards at the back of all the houses. And these men would come at night because it would be less stinky, I suppose, because there's no sunlight going onto it, and they would come with their horses and scrape with their shovels all this waste onto the horse's carriage, and then take it away to be dumped elsewhere. The backup for this claim that the 9 o'clock horses would get you is that as a young child, if you're still up, we'll have to knock on the door to let the night soilman in, so they will take you, so that you will end up doing their job for the rest of your life. So if you don't go to bed, you're going to be shoveling poo for the rest of your life, is basically what that threat came from. But the more famous one is Black Annis. Black Annis is a witch. She is not just a witch, she's the stereotypal witch. With a few exceptions. She's got blue skin, she's got oily black hair, she's got one huge massive eye on the side of her head, she's got sharp pointy teeth, she's got sharp pointy claws made of iron, and she would actually, she was said to walk through the streets of Leicester, and she would reach with her long arms and claws into the windows and take any child that was unattended, and she would drag them back to her cave at the Dane Hills, which is now a council estate. So the cave isn't there anymore, or at least it's bricked up. But she would eat their flesh, and supposedly she actually had a skirt made of all the skin of the children that she's eaten. Yes. So she's a very, very grim and horrible figure. She's even supposedly haunts part of Leicestershire even today. But it's thought that she actually came from this old hermit nun who was called Agnes, and she had her black habit, and she lived in a hermitage, basically on the outskirts near Charnwood. But by all accounts, she was actually just a nice old nun living by herself. So how that transformed into Black Anis, maybe because of the black habit, and of course, Anis sounds very similar to Agnes, I suppose. It's a theory. Whether there's actually any stock in it, I'm not sure. I've yet to do a episode on Black Anis and cover that history of the folklore there. But supposedly in Leicestershire, this is why any of the old houses were built with no windows on the ground floor, to stop this old hag from reaching in and grabbing their children and devouring them. So I think that's what your friend may have described there.
Yeah, well, he was just talking because he's actually from Leicester, and he was just like, yeah, try that one. And I was like, well, is that? And then I looked a bit of it on Google, and I was like, oh yeah, that'd be a good one to talk about. And that, yeah.
What's worse? Sorry. Oh, we're being far too British. What kind of made it worse, though, was that the people of Leicester actually encouraged Black Anis to do this, because there was a game that was done every single year outside her cave, where they would get a cat dripped in a dead cat, might I add, dripped in aniseed, hold it outside her cave, basically call upon her. I suppose it's a bit like, you're not real, you don't exist, na 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 na, and then they would run with this aniseed dead cat to see if she would actually come out of the cave. So they were terrified of her, but at the same time they kind of dared her to come along. So yeah.
So you could have said they tried to wind her up, trying to get her to come out, and so that's what I'm thinking. If they're doing that and that. So did you say the cave's bricked up nowadays? Is it? Or... As far as I'm aware, like I say, I've yet to cover an actual episode on this, which means I will do a proper investigation on it. But as far as I know, the actual cave that she was supposed to have come from, or haunts, is no longer accessible, and that the whole area of the Dane Hills is just a council estate now. So you wouldn't find any trace of it, as far as I'm aware. I've yet to actually go and visit the place, but we'll see. Have you got, what's the best one from like the East Midlands? There must be one famous that everyone in the East Midlands must know. Is there like a scary one, much scary one than you were talking about? You said about the witch, the one took this witching. Was there any more like wizards or witches or any kind of that in the medieval time of that, or no? I would say that probably the story of Jack the Buttermilk, which is the second most famous story from Nottingham, apart from Robin Hood, which is where you've got a young man called Jack who is selling buttermilk in the market, and this witch comes along and demands his buttermilk, to which he says, no, I need to sell that. I'm sorry, I can't give you for free. She doesn't like this and says, well, no, you're going to give it for free or I'll eat you. Jack holds his own and tells her to get lost. She walks away and then ends up getting captured by the said witch and put into a bag. She takes him along, realizes she's forgotten something, and then has to go back into Nottingham to go and get that thing. So a pot of fat, for example. So she dumps him by a hedge. Jack, inside this bag, can just about make out there's some people that are actually cutting this bramble hedge, and he shouts, help, help. The witch has dropped me here and she's going to eat me. Please get me out. They cut the bag open. Jack then fills this bag full of the brambles that they've cut at the hedge, sews it back up, legs it. The witch goes back to her house by carrying this bag, and notes that, Jack, you need to put some meat on your bones. Your knees and elbows go into my back, lad. And then she opens up her house. She gets this white sheet down the floor, opens the bag, but instead of Jack, has this whole bunch of brambles fall out onto there. And she's like, I will get you, Jack. I'll eat you for my dinner. Next weekend, Same thing happens again. She asks for the buttermilk. Jack tells him to get lost. He finishes at market, gets captured by her again. And this time she forgets that she's left some herbs behind in Nottingham. So she just jumps in by this wall and then goes back to Nottingham. Jack shouts, help, help, because you can just make out there's some men working on this new stone drywall. This witch has captured me. She's going to eat me. Please get me out of the bag. They cut him out, and he fills it with some of the dry stone that have been left spare and seals it back up. She takes the bag, takes it back into the house, throws it open onto the white sheet, and then screeches again, I'll get you for my dinner. Third weekend, you thought everybody would have learned their lesson by now.
Yeah.
Third weekend, Jack tells her to get lost because she's demanding free buttermilk, and she captures him again, except doesn't forget a thing. She takes him all the way home into her little cottage and puts him on the sheet, still in the bag. And then she says, right, I'm just going to cut some wood up outside, and I'm going to use that to boil that cauldron full of water and make you into a stew. You wait right there. So she goes outside and she's chopping wood. At this point, Jack was prepared. He brought a penknife this time, so he did learn his lesson from the past 2 weekends. He cuts that bag open and he looks around very quickly, and he opens up the witch's cabinet, puts all her fine china into the bag, sews it back up, crawls up the chimney. The witch comes back in. She cackles with delight, and then she opens the bag and smashes all her crockery. While that's going on, Jack climbs out of the house and he runs away, never to be bothered by the witch again, who never gets after him. That's a story that's kind of been repeated outside of Nottinghamshire as well. But I would say Black Annis is perhaps the most famous evil witch figure in these Midlands, at least.
Thank you. All right, thank you for that, Dylan. Back to you, Lee.
Okay, I think now is the time for us to shine a light on the creative processes involved in establishing folk tales. And the way that we can do that is by the four of us today, now, completely unrehearsed, creating our own modern day folk tale. An urban legend, if you like. And I think it would be good if there was a moral to the story. So this could go spectacularly wrong, or
Oh, God, great.
so I'll pick on Dylan at first.
Fair enough.
Male or female, Dylan?
Let's go for female, because let's make it female.
Okay. Chris, how old is this female?
I'll say 25 to 30.
Okay. Dave, where does she live in the UK?
Oh, what was I say? Bias in Cornwall, I say.
Brilliant. Somewhere rural or in a town or city?
I'll go rural.
Okay. I'm going to say that she lives alone, but she has a cat.
Rich.
So, Dylan, at this point, could you just remind us of the key ingredients in a folk tale?
Okay, so it's got to be somewhere that is in a local area. So, whereabouts in Cornwall should we have then, Dave?
I reckon maybe Boscastle, famous for witches. Boscastle.
Oh, okay then. It can be modern day. It doesn't have to be, but it can be modern day.
I think it would be good if it was.
Yep, and it's got to have some sinister connotation. And it's got to end with either the person being dead or has never seen again.
Okay. What's the name of our protagonist, Dylan?
Martha.
Martha. Okay. So Martha, we'll say 27 years old. She lives alone in Boscastle with her cat. So one day she decides to go out for a walk along the coast, a nice coast walk for a couple of hours. And she's walking along. It's a perfectly nice sunny day. And Dylan, what happens next?
As she's walking along the coast, she sees something. It looks like there is actually footprints in the sand walking alongside her. Cat footprints, very similar to her own cat, but her cat is not physically there. And she can hear a song coming from the distance as the shore crashes along into the surf. So what does that song sound like, Chris?
Sounds like a whistle noise, like a la la, like a la la la, la la la, la la la. And she wants to know where the sound's coming from. And she looks around, and there's nothing there. But all she hears is la la la, la la la, la la la, and she's still looking, and she's wondering where the sounds come from. What do you think, Dave?
Well, the whistling now, obviously you think about the element. Is it the wind? Or, if it's a whistling sound, or is it the wind, or is it something that's a bit different from the wind? And trying to work out what the location is. So is it coming from the coast, coming from the sea, or is there somewhere hidden in the cliffs where the sound is coming from?
So she continues to walk, and she approaches a large outcrop of rocks. She can still hear this whistling sound, this melodic noise. And she walks around the outcrop, and there, sat on the grass, is a young girl with long blonde hair, maybe about 5 or 6 years old. So obviously she's extremely surprised to see this vision, this person in front of her. And she cautiously approaches, and as she does so, the singing, which the girl has been doing, stops. And the little girl looks at her. And Dylan, what happens next?
And the little girl says, "Hello there. I have this picnic with this wine and this bread. Would you like to share it with me?" And Martha is somehow entranced into this, and she finds herself walking ever so closely towards the young girl and sitting down just in front of her. The little girl offers a goblet of wine and some bread which smells absolutely sumptuous, as though it's just been baked. And Martha tears a piece of the bread off, and she takes the goblet, and she's just about to put the wine to her lips when she hears the hiss of a cat, which then jumps out and knocks. What does she knock, Chris?
She knocks a goblet of wine as she's about to take. She says to herself, little girl says, "Why? Why is he knocking that out?" And she says, "I don't know. Are you some kind of witch?" She says, "No. How dare you call myself a witch? How dare! I will never share anything with you again." Next minute, some smoke comes up. She looks back and she says, "Oh my God." What now, Dave?
Is this smoke? What is this? Is this in terms of apparition? Is it some character I know? Why is this? You giving me the knocking? What was the cat knocking my wine out of me? Was there a reason for that? Is this smoke again some sort of warning? Tell me that I shouldn't be here. Andy?
Yes, Martha's really quite scared now. And she looks at the girl sat there, and suddenly the girl has haunting eyes, quite unsettling eyes, and Martha is terrified. She jumps up, runs away from the outcrop, and runs all the way home. She walks back into her cottage, into the living room, and
she finds that everything is as it should be, except her cat is curled up just on the settee in its usual space. And she thinks, how can the cat be here? And how can it be asleep? And she goes to stroke her cat and realizes the cat is no longer breathing and is in fact very poorly and quite certainly dead.
And I think that's the end.
There we go.
That was hard.
The witchcraft shop in Boscastle. That's a good location.
And isn't it interesting how we did gravitate towards the figure of the witch? Because we could have spoken about anything, couldn't we, in this in this modern day tale, and yet that there's something from our unconscious that's, I think, maybe nudging us in certain directions.
But I think that's one of the.
Sorry, Dylan.
I think that's one of the whole things about folk tales, regardless of where they're from. They're all relatable. When we say that some of them are of their time, like old-fashioned values, yes, absolutely, some of them are, but some of them, if not all, actually do contain something that even we can relate to now. So even if something's got old-fashioned values, that doesn't mean that it's not really applicable to us. But we can take, for example, the lesson of, well, of course the old witch told the young girl not to look at the chimney. But we all know children do what you tell them not to. So was that witch really looking for her? Or was she just putting on a bit of a show because she thought, that poor young girl who sells oranges, she deserves a better life. I know, I'll take her in. I'll put a bunch of money that I've got aside under the chimney, and if I tell her not to do it, she'll look for it, she'll find it, and then she can do what she wants with it.
Yeah.
Was it actually an act of charity rather than don't do this?
It seems to me, Dylan, that she was trying to help her out. You know what I mean, with the chimney thing. She was trying to help her out, trying to say, "Don't look in the chimney. Don't look in the chimney." Every time, get in the whole house, don't look at the chimney. What are you going to do? You're going to look at the chimney. So that's what it says to me. It's a bit of charity. So
yeah, it makes me think it's premeditated. It's like no one's that naive, especially not an old lady, an old lady who knows things. Just saying.
Unfortunately, we don't have very long. I think it would be really good to finish. Perhaps, Dylan, if you could provide us with one final tale, maybe one of your favourites, maybe that has featured in Tales from the Otherwood, or maybe not.
Yallery Brown. It's from Lincolnshire. I know we've already covered there, but it's my favourite story because it's sinister. It's about a young boy called Tom who works on a farm. And Tom is a young, strapping lad of 18 years. I'm conscious of time, so I'll just keep it going. On a Sunday, because we're talking traditional days here, on a Sunday, there's no farm work going on. He doesn't mind the farm work. He actually quite enjoys it. Pays well, and it's good labour, good exercise as well. But on this particular Sunday in July, he's been at his mum and dad's house. He's had all his sisters around and have all been having their Sunday lunch and everything. And it gets to evening, and it's like, right, I've got to go back to the farm now. So he takes himself off, and the sky is a nice, gorgeous lavender colour, and the trees are kind of whispering amongst themselves. You can hear the leaves. You can also hear something else as he's walking along this particular field. He doesn't go his usual route because that would get him to work quicker. So he decides to cut through this field, which people say it's haunted. Tom doesn't believe in that. And he's walking along and he can hear amongst the wind this cry. It sounds like a baby sort of crying. So he's looking around and he finds that there's all these little white stones all around. And these are, in Lincolnshire speak, the tiddy stones, where the tiddy people usually tend to sit and tend them. But the crying's definitely coming from one of these. And he thinks, is this a baby? Is this a baby left behind by the local lass who's a little bit loose in morals, shall we say? And terrified that a young baby has been left in this field, he goes to the source of this crying, and it's a stone. And he, as far as he can tell, it's coming from under the stone. So he's strong enough to actually roll part of the stone away and finds there's actually this small, tiny little hole. And in that small, tiny little hole is a small, tiny little man with bright blonde hair, as though it's made from wheat, and nut brown skin, as though it's made from the soil itself, and his huge, big, dark eyes and a big blonde beard. And this little fellow just jumps out of the hole and says, "Oh, Tom, my lad, you've done some very good work. Very, very good work indeed. You've let me out. Now then, Tom, I will grant you a wish. You can have anything you like. You can have the most rampingest lass in all of Lincolnshire if you want." Tom thinks about that and thinks, nah, I've got loads of sisters. Women are more trouble than they're worth. How about all the gold in all the land? Make you as very rich as rich can be. Tom thinks about that and says, no. If I have all that wealth, then that means people will steal it and just take it for themselves. So that's no good to anyone. But you can do my jobs for me if you want. Done, says the little man, and then spits in his hand and offers to shake it. Tom shakes it and says, just one question though. You know my name. What's yours? And the little creature says, you can call me Yallery Brown. That's my name, Yallery Brown, good Tom. Now, I'll do all your work for you at your little farm, so don't worry about that. The only thing is, Tom, don't thank me. Never thank me. And with that, Yallery Brown takes a dandelion in his little puff face. He blows it into Tom's face, and when Tom's batting away all the dandelion bluffs in his face, Yallery Brown's no longer there. He walks to the farm, gets back, and goes to sleep. The very next day, he gets up for work, kind of forgetting what happened the night before, and he finds that his jobs are all done already. The horses have been brushed, the stables have been cleaned out, the pigs have been fed. And this goes on for a good couple of weeks. But this is what Lincolnshire folk call arsey-varsey, when things go a little bit wrong, because it turns out that whatever mops have been used, it's someone else's mop. If tools have been used, it's someone else's tools. And the other farm lads have been saying little reports of a tiny little creature which has been jumping left and right in the dark, usually when Tom's around. And it gets to the point where the farmer pulls Tom aside and says, I'm sorry, lad, well, I'll have to let you go because you're dabbling in things that we don't understand. You probably don't understand yourself, and well, it's scaring the lads. So here's your last pay. Off you go. Tom's not particularly happy, and he's not in a good mood. He quite liked it here, especially the fact that he was still getting paid but not doing the work. He finds himself going into a field, and he shouts out, Yallery Brown, get from the mools and get yourself here now. Yallery Brown pops up and says, hello there, Tom. Good to see you, my lad. Good to see you. Now, are you impressed with all the jobs I've been doing for you? Tom is the opposite of pleased. He's furious, saying, because of you, I've lost my job. And that means no one else will employ me now. So what else am I going to do? I'm going to thank you for your service, but that's your lot. Yallery Brown laughs. He cackles his high-pitched little laugh. And he says, oh, Tom, you've done it now, lad. You've done it now. I told you never to thank me, didn't I? And you thanked me. And he starts dancing around Tom, singing this little song. Work though you will, you'll never do well. Work though you might, you'll never gain out. For harm and mischance in Yallery Brown, you let out yourself from under the stone. And with that, Yallery Brown curses Tom, and curses that Tom will never have success, and that all his work and all his gains will be for nothing. And Yallery Brown finishes this by saying, "You'll never see me again, Tom. That I'll guarantee. But I'll always be with you, Tom. I'll always be with you." And that's when Yallery Brown gathered his long blonde hair into a ball, turns himself into a massive dandelion puff, and floats away into the dark. And Yallery Brown was true to his word. Tom worked as a farmer, set up his own farm, got married, but everything he grew became diseased and decayed. The cows became diseased and died. His wife was barren and could never have children, and she died quite young. And Tom was left with wreck and ruin, and always in the background, always that little dark figure jumping from the shadows here and there and everywhere.
That's a good story.
Yes, that's quite a way to finish, isn't it? Dylan, what's next for you in terms of content writing?
At the minute, unfortunately, real life has happened this year in more ways than one. So I've had to put my podcast on a bit of a sidestep. But what's happening is instead of doing my usual, which is trying to make write, research, and produce an episode all in the same month, I'm actually just writing the next 7 episodes up as we speak. So I'm writing. I'm already covering a story from Northampton, which is based on a poem, a bit like we were saying last month, which is also a mixture of a ghost story. I've also doing another episode of Robin Hood, because I've already covered Robin Hood and the Monk quite a few years ago. I'm now doing the second oldest story, but I'm actually translating it from the oldie English into modern English. So it's still the ballad format, but it's going to be used in, when I tell it, it's going to be using the modern English to tell the original story. And then I'll be covering Black Annis for Halloween.
Brilliant. Well, we certainly look forward to that. Dylan Knight, magnificent guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it's
Thank you,
goodbye.
Dylan.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Chris.
Bye.
And Dave.
Bye.
And Dylan.
Bye.
We'll catch you next time on the Shadowcast.